Hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest, 8-Second Gaming, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the Season 23 Split 1 weapon tier list. Everyone wants to know what kind of weapons they should be running this season, so don't worry, I've got you covered. But just quickly, if you guys are here and you haven't yet, then you have to check out the GameLeap website right now. Over there, we have top level coaches creating the best, most highly informative guides to make you the best player you can possibly be. There are literally hundreds of guides on the site already, with more on the way every single day that cover legend guides, gun guides, VOD reviews, positioning guides, mentality guides, literally everything you need to win and hit a new peak rank. We've helped a ton of people already and you can be next, so click the link in the description, pick yourself up a membership and start to improve today. But okay, with that covered, let's hop into things, and I do want to cover one thing just very quickly. People always ask this on every single weapon tier list, and I gotta make this announcement. The care package weapons are not on this tier list. The care package weapons are all strong. They would be S+, so there's no real point in putting them on the actual tier list itself, so they go in their own special category. We got that? Good. Let's move into the D tier, and there's only one weapon here, and that is the RE45. The game has out-phased the RE45. When the game first came out, if you found this off drop, it wasn't that bad, because as people are seeing right now, when the game first came out, you had no armor off drop, you had no heals off drop, and the RE45 could actually put in some work. But now in Season 23, it has just been left in the dust, and it is no longer even remotely a good weapon. If you get hammer points, yeah, it can be somewhat decent, but honestly, if you have hammer points, you should just be running a Mozambique or P20 Akimbos anyway, because they outphase that completely. The RE45 is just a light mag holder. It's not good. D tier it is. But now we can move into the next tier, which is the C tier, and there are 4 weapons finding themselves here. We have the Devotion, the Rampage, the Charge Rifle, and the Longbow. Now starting up, we have the Devotion, and this one did come out of the care package this season and go back to ground loot. But right now, LMGs are not in the best of spots. They're still not really that strong in the meta in terms of what their usefulness is. And the Devotion losing the turbocharger was a pretty big hit to it. Now, most of the time, you don't actually have the ability to spin the Devotion up before somebody's actually just running at you with a shotgun. And with Newcastle and Gibraltar being so big in the meta right now, sometimes you don't even have the option of shooting at them with the Devotion, because you can't break a Gibby shield, you can't break the mobile shield from Newcastle. They have so many different options, and the Devotion just isn't a good option right now. If we see the reintroduction of the turbocharger, or they do give it some buffs to spin up a little bit faster, then I could see the Devotion moving up some tiers, but right now there are just so many better options that have faster time to kills and just better damage output, so I don't see the Devotion being anything higher than a C tier. And the same thing goes for its LMG counterpart, the Rampage. The Rampage going into Season 23 did get some nice quality of life buffs when it is revved up. However, when it's not revved up, the gun is borderline useless. It's kind of like a marksman rifle without being a marksman rifle, and it does have some niche situations where it is actually really strong, but being good in a niche situation does not warrant being anything higher than C tier. You want a gun that's good in multitudes of situations if you want it to be higher on a tier list. Now, maybe if we do see the Rampage get the same treatment as the L-Star and the Spitfire, where it does receive a damage increase, I could potentially see it moving up in the tiers. But for right now, unless the Rampage is revved up, then it isn't really a good weapon, and it does lose to pretty much every single other weapon in the game. And I also do want to make this clear. In order to charge up a Rampage, you have to waste backpack space carrying thermite grenades. And right now, thermites are not the best grenade in the meta. Frag grenades are much better. Arc stars are always better. So you're wasting valuable space carrying thermite grenades that you're not even using as grenades. You're using it to charge up a Rampage. So it's kind of dead space in a backpack. And if you don't have a big backpack to begin with, then you are losing a ton of resources. I just don't think that is worth it for a mediocre weapon, so C tier the Rampage is. Moving on though, we have the Charge Rifle, and this thing used to be the bane of everyone's existences. If the Charge Rifle was being run in the game, you knew it, and it was super annoying. Now the Charge Rifle can be good, and if you're hitting somebody from a distance with a headshot, you can down them in one shot pretty much, because it does do ridiculous amounts of damage. But again, that is a niche situation, and also right now the longer range weapons just aren't as used. useful. Again, Gibraltar and Newcastle are big in the meta, so even if you do down someone from a long distance with the sniper rifle, there isn't very many opportunities to thirst that person because they're probably just getting rezzed immediately with some form of blockage, so you don't actually get any more shots off on them. The only real usefulness that a sniper rifle does have right now is the fact that it can take meds away from somebody and you can charge up your Evo shields while doing it. But again, there are trade-offs with that, because if you want to charge up your Evo shield, just grab the Evo harvesters on the way to zone, hit recon beacons, open supply bins, look at care packages. There are so many ways to get up to purple armor extremely quickly that farming Evo damage isn't really the biggest thing in the meta right now. And with all of the fights being super aggressive and teams wanting to take hard aggressive positions on somebody, there's not a lot of times you are going to be using a sniper rifle effectively, and when it gets up to close range, you are essentially down to one weapon, which puts you at a massive disadvantage. So that is why I'm leaving the charge rifle in C tier. The last weapon in C tier is the longbow. Now, going into season 23, the longbow did receive a damage buff, which does make it a good sniper rifle once again. Before, it kind of was borderline meme status with how bad the longbow was in terms of the other sniper rifles. But now it is actually doing what you want a sniper rifle to do. It has good oppressive damage at range, but it has every single drawback that I just mentioned with the charge rifle. When you get this into close range, it still isn't that good, so you're essentially down to one weapon in those close quarter fights with Newcastle, Gibraltar, stuff like that. And again, the longbow is just not that good at thirsting people once they are down, because they have the res shields in front of them, they have the dome. Just stuff is so hard to thirst right now at a distance. The longbow is a weapon that I do want people to keep an eye out for though, because if Newcastle and Gibraltar start to fall out of the meta and we are seeing a little bit longer ranges again, then it is possible that this would actually become meta because of how good the damage output is. But for right now, C tier it remains. But that is the C tier done, so let's move into the next tier, which is the B tier, and we have 7 weapons here. We have the alternator, the car, the prowler, the wingman, the 30-30 repeater, the triple take, and the L-star. Now, starting off the alternator, it's just the perfect B tier weapon. There's nothing broken about it, but it's not necessarily a bad weapon. It's really good for beginners because it does have decent damage output potential with not being that hard to control. The only thing really being a drawback for the alternator is it doesn't have the fastest time to kill. It has good damage potential, but the time to kill just isn't there quite yet. So if you are being focused in a fight, you are probably going to lose that straight up 1v1 unless they are missing their shots, but relying on somebody to miss their shots isn't quite the best thing in the meta. So in terms of the alternator, it's just a balanced weapon, which is perfect for B tier. So that's why I'm putting it in B tier. Moving forward though, we do have the car, and this is one that I was debating sliding into A tier, but I don't think the car is quite A tier in this meta. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but I do have to talk about it once again. Gibraltar and Newcastle, and to an extent Lifeline in this situation, do warp the weapon meta. In order to actually contest those people in a bubble, in a mobile shield fight, you have to have a shotgun or a weapon that is able to put out maximum amounts of damage in short times. And if somebody has a car, you can play around the spray by dipping in and out of the bubble. Somebody that has an SMG like the car isn't going to be able to quite keep up with a shotgun dipping in and out. These support legends warp the weapon meta, and the tier lists do reflect that, because right now you essentially have to run a shotgun in order to keep up with these bubble fights. So for that reason, that's why I want to put it in B tier instead of A tier. But this isn't necessarily because I think it's a bad weapon. I just don't think it's that strong in the current meta. So I do think it's more towards the balance side of things, and that's why I'm putting it in the B tier. And the same thing goes with the Prowler. Now the Prowler does have the added benefit of being able to be burst, and you can walk into a bubble and burst somebody with the Prowler. But the Prowler has received some nerfs, and it just doesn't seem to have the damage output that it has in the past. When you're comparing this to a different up-close weapon, it just doesn't have the same damage potential, and it doesn't have the same burst ability of something. I do want to make this very clear though, I have a really tough time placing SMGs in this meta because it's not necessarily that SMGs are weak, it's just that they're not good in the current meta. They're more towards the balance side of things because supports make them balanced because they can't get the benefit of SMGs. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but again, weapons are meta because of how strong they are against certain types of legends, how good they are with certain types of ranges, and right now, the close range weapons are shotguns, so SMGs do fall fall out of the meta. So the car and the prowler, B tier. Moving forward though, we have the wingman. And this one is just super straightforward. The wingman has just slowed down to the point where the other weapons have faster time to kills, and the weapon isn't that useful anymore. The wingman before was a high risk, high reward weapon. If you were hitting headshots, you were getting a lot of reward out of the risk that you were putting in because it was a single shot weapon and it was semi-decently hard to actually hit those shots. If you were good with the wingman, you got rewarded for it. But now there's just so many good weapons in the up close fights that if you rush someone with a wingman, you're more than likely going to win that fight unless, again, they're an absolute god. This is a weird time for the wingman because in my opinion, I do think that it is actually pretty balanced right now and you kind of get out what you put in. So that is why I'm saying the wingman is a B tier weapon. Moving forward though, we have the 30-30 and the triple take, and I want to talk about these guys at the same time because they are essentially the same reason for being B tier, and that is the choke up time. Marksman rifles are in a little bit of a better spot when it does come to longer range poke because they do have the added benefit of still being good in medium ranges. They're more aggressive type of weapons for when you want to poke somebody, because as you get closer and closer, then they still have their damage potential, and also they have better opportunities when it does come to closer range. The 30-30's hipfire is not bad. The triple take, some people say is a shotgun. I don't agree with them, but some people say it. So not only are they good in the far ranges where they can poke somebody down, maybe open up a fight by getting a crack or even a knock, but they're also good at multitudes of ranges. So that's why I think they're more towards the B tier instead of something like the C tier, like the charge rifle and the longbow. But the reason I have them in B tier, not anything higher, is of course because of the charge up time. You have to wait between bullets before you can actually hit somebody for maximum amounts of damages. You can spam shots out, but you are going to be taking a lower damage in order to do that. Having that time in between shots isn't the best thing when you are trying to kill somebody quickly. And again, broken record, but Gibraltar, Newcastle, they give people spots to heal and take a breath at a moment's notice. So sometimes those charge up times are going to actually lose you a kill, and that can be quite annoying, but that's why I think they are B tier. And the last weapon in the B tier is the L-Star. Now again, the L-Star was one of the weapons that did get a buff, so it is much better in the meta. The issue with the L-Star and the reason that it's B tier, not anything higher, is because it doesn't have good at range potential. The L-Star isn't the best at actually going into the medium and long ranges where the other LMGs are still decently strong. The L-Star plays more like an SMG, but again, right now SMGs aren't in the best of positions, and also the L-Star doesn't have the strafe speed that the SMGs do. You can hip fire it and it does have decent hip fire, but if you start to aim down sights, you are going to be slowed and you're going to be easier to hit. So that's why I don't think the L-Star is anything higher. But that is the B tier done. But before we move into the A tier, I do want to give one quick announcement. I am streaming once again over on Twitch TV/8second gaming. So if you guys want to see my gameplay live or even ask me questions and get an answer straight away, then come check me out. I would love to see some new faces there. But okay, with that done, let's move into the A tier. And there are 8 weapons here. We have the Sentinel, the Scout, the Volt, the Spitfire, the P2020, the Mozambique, the EVA 8, and the Peacekeeper. Now starting off, we do have the Sentinel, and I know some people are going to be questioning, if I don't like sniper rifles, why do I have the Sentinel here? And it's for one very simple reason. A charged up Sentinel is a Kraber that you can pick up off ground loot, and that is strong and it cannot be ignored. Also, going into this season, the Sentinel did receive the boosted loader hop up, so you have so much damage output potential in one clip that has faster reloads, more bullets in the magazine, and the Sentinel can be used a little bit more aggressively than other sniper rifles because unlike the other sniper rifles, this actually does have a pretty decent hipfire, and you'd be surprised the kind of shots you can pull off in close range. Despite being a sniper rifle, the Sentinel is actually good in multiple situations, and because it is a mini Kraber, it has so much potential for opening up fights that it cannot be ignored. And unlike the Rampage, this only requires a shield cell to charge up, and that is something that you are carrying around to begin with. And if you're a support character, you're actually carrying around more of these, so you have more opportunities to charge this up. So you're not really losing any backpack space, and then therefore are not losing any resources, So not only is this a strong weapon, it's not taking anything away in terms of the resources that you have at your disposal. The Sentinel cannot be ignored with how strong it is, but I don't think it's S tier because again, sniper rifles aren't in the best position, but it is strong enough that it is an A tier weapon. Moving forward though, we do have the G7 Scout, and this marksman rifle is A tier for another simple reason. It doesn't have the charge up time between shots. It's a marksman rifle that you can spam shots out with a high damage output potential and can down somebody incredibly quickly. And like the other marksman rifles, it does have decent hip fire, so if you have to pull this out in a close range situation, you are not SOL. But it is still a marksman rifle, so it still has those drawbacks that I did mention with the 30-30 and the triple take. Marksman rifles just aren't in the best position due to the legend meta, so that's why it's A tier. The next weapon though is the Volt, and the Volt is an SMG, but it doesn't play like an SMG most of the time. The Volt is actually really stable and can be used at medium ranges, so when you're using a Volt, sometimes you use it more like an assault rifle. And it's for that reason that I have it in the A tier instead of the B tier with the other SMGs. Having the flexibility to not only be good in close range because it is an SMG, but also be able to be good in medium ranges and play like an assault rifle is really strong. The Volt is a very versatile, flexible weapon, and since it came out, it has been a good weapon in pretty much every single meta. Sometimes it's a little bit more slept on than it should be, but for right now, I think people do respect the Volt and do understand that it is strong. It just doesn't see the same amount of play because the assault rifles are just so much better. That being said though, the Volt is still a good weapon, so A tier. But next up we have the Spitfire, and going into this season, it did receive a damage buff that has made it so strong. The Spitfire before was a good weapon. It had a bunch of rounds in the magazine, it had good damage output potential, it's really easy to control the recoil, but receiving that damage buff on top of all that has made it incredibly strong, and it's actually my go-to weapon right now this season. But like I did mention with the L-Star, it is still an LMG, so you have that strafe speed reduction when you are ADSing. So if you're the target of somebody, you're not going to be as elusive, you're going to be a little bit easier to hit, and it's going to be easier for them to one-clip you or to be able to fight back against the Spitfire. As a Spitfire user, you have to be understanding that you cannot be the center of attention when you are in a fight. You have to wait for your teammates to actually take the heat before you can start to use this. But once this is actually opened up and you are sending round after round at somebody, you can crack and knock like 2 or 3 people depending on what magazine you have and what armors they have. There's so much damage potential in one magazine of the Spitfire that it cannot be ignored. It's kind of like the Sentinel. It has so much potential with only one drawback keeping it out of the S tier. But next up we have the P2020, and I am talking about the P2020 in terms of akimbos here, because if you're running one, you're running both of them. And right now the P2020 akimbos are deadly. They are super strong, especially with hammer points. They don't need to have hammer points because they have decent fast fire rate and can put out a good amount of damage without them. But once you slap hammer points on these, they are incredible. And they are also one of the weapons that did receive a buff going into the season, and the hip fire is more accurate. But even if you're not hip firing and you're doing the little ADS thing that it does have, these are still really strong because they're not that inaccurate. And in some cases, I've actually been able to outgun somebody that's using an assault rifle while using a P20 at a medium distance. And it might come as a surprise, but this is actually one of the few weapons that I've found success with combating the res meta that we do have going on. Because of the hammer points, as soon as somebody gets up, you're spraying so many bullets that down them instantly, it's hard for the revive mechanics to actually kick in. If a Newcastle picks somebody up, they're down right away. If a Lifeline's trying to pick somebody up, they get thirsted almost instantly. A Gibby tries to res somebody, you're in that bubble, you're sending shot after shot at them. This is actually one of the few spray mechanic weapons that can keep up in the meta in terms of the close range. But it does have the drawbacks of kind of needing the hammer points, which are a gold hop up, and they did reduce the spawn rate this season. And also, it's still not the best in terms of bubble fighting or mobile shield fighting, so it does have those drawbacks. They're not as impactful as the Mozambiques were last season type deal in terms of how good akimbos are, but they are still good, so that's why I'm saying that they're A tier. But next up we have 3 of the shotguns, the Mozambique akimbos, the EVA 8, and the Peacekeeper. And despite these being shotguns and being strong in the up-close meta, they're not the go-to shotguns and they're not the broken shotguns. The Peacekeeper right now is too inconsistent. Most of the time for the Peacekeeper, you have to choke it up a little bit in order to actually be hitting most of the pellets in a bubble fight, and sometimes you don't get that opportunity. Because of that, it's not the go-to weapon for bubble bubble fights. And the Eva and the Mozambique are spray shotguns. They're meant to be in someone's face and overwhelm them with the amount of shots that you do have. But you can't do that when it comes to some of the fights that the support legends are making this season. They control the flow of them. They control the pace of them. They're not going to allow you to overwhelm them like that if they know what they're doing. But these 3 shotguns still have great damage output potential, and they are still good overall. The only thing keeping them really out of the S tier is the fact that they're not the go-to weapons for bubble fighting. And that's really what a shotgun is supposed to be doing this season. They want to be good in those bubble fights. They want to be good at combating the res meta. These don't do it quite as effectively. They're still not bad options, but that's why they're A tier, not S tier. But now we can move into the S tier. We can talk about the top weapons. There are 5 weapons here. We have the Mastiff, the Hemlock, the Nemesis, the Flatline, and the R301. The Mastiff right now is just the go-to shotgun. It has insane burst damage potential with how much you can actually hit somebody for in one shot. It doesn't need to choke up because all you have to do is ADS in order to tighten the bullet spread. It can reload 1 bullet at a time, so if you're in a bubble fight and you have a little bit of downtime, you can start reloading it without having major drawbacks. It's just the go-to shotgun. If you want a shotgun, which you should be running a shotgun in this meta, the Mastiff is just the option for you. But next up we have the 4 assault rifles, and some people might be wondering, are all the assault rifles really S tier right now? And the answer is yes. We are still in a very heavy assault rifle meta when it comes to your second option for weapons. The Hemlock honestly is the one that I did debate putting down into the A tier, but after using it a little bit, it is still a strong option. People just aren't running it as often because the Nemesis is probably the better burst weapon in my opinion, but the Hemlock is still a good option. But when it comes to assault rifles, they're all really good in their own right, but assault rifles are just super strong right now because you can use them in every single situation. Close range, they still have pretty good hip fire options, so you can use it there. Medium range, that's where they thrive. That's where they want to be. They have good damage output potential. They can just absolutely open up a fight without really having drawbacks to them. And in the long range, most of them do have the option to switch over to a single fire. So if you're really stretching out the range of these, you have that option as well. But overall, these weapons are just so good in so many different situations. It's hard to ignore them, and they are just the S tiers weapons that they have been in the past. But let me know if you guys would change any of these ratings in the comments down below. And if you guys want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Apex Legends tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I'm 8 Second Gaming. I'll see you guys in the next one.